You are listening to The Tarot Diagnosis. I'm your host, Shannon. I'm a licensed psychotherapist, and I also happen to have a love for tarot. Each episode, I invite you to reflect with me as I work to demystify the tarot and the human experience, all while exploring tarot's connection to mental and emotional health. While this podcast may feel therapeutic, it is not meant to take the place of psychotherapy. So grab your cards and join me as I work to create a pathway to better understand ourselves and those around us. This year on the Tarot Diagnosis podcast, I'm going to be introducing a new series, which will probably be at least monthly, that I'm calling Tarot Therapy. And the idea around the Tarot Therapy series is that I'll be getting back to the roots and the foundation of this work, which is talking about tarot through the lens of psychotherapeutic modalities and different theories. I'm really excited to be doing this and hope that you all find it interesting and valuable and have fun with what I'm going to do with some of these episodes. I'm kicking off this series by exploring the aces specifically, and I'm going to be looking at them through the trans-theoretical model, also known as the stages of change. And if you're a member of the Tarot Diagnosis community, the symposium, then you know we just did a workshop on this concept. So this episode might feel a little bit more like a refresher if you attended the workshop live or watched the replay. And for those of you who are not a member, then you're getting kind of a sneak peek into the topics that we discuss in workshops and meetups. All right, so let's talk about what the stages of change model actually is. So the stages of change is a really concise and structured way for us to look at the process of growth and transformation. And so for those of you who are familiar with it, might know it because it was originally developed to explore how we move through different behavioral changes, specifically as it relates to addiction and recovery. This model is actually really flexible, though, and I feel like it can be applied to a wide range of personal changes and the desire to be different, experience the world differently, even change our thoughts. So I thought that it was perfect to apply to tarot. So just to give a really brief overview of what the stages of change are even made up of, there are 5 main stages that most of us are familiar with, and they're pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, action, and maintenance. And then there's also sometimes a 6th stage, and this is for relapse, depending on, of course, what type of change it's being applied to. So if this was being applied to someone in recovery or working through a certain addiction, then you would obviously add the 6th stage for relapse. And then each stage reflects a really specific mindset and different tasks that we should be engaging in, or things that might be taking place when we enter into that stage. And what's really cool is when we integrate this model, this idea of the stages of change, with certain tools like tarot, or particularly the aces, which we're going to be talking about today, we create more meaningful experiences and a stronger framework for exploring some of the energetic shifts that happen when we're within kind of each of these stages of change. And then it becomes kind of less about, going through the motions or going through the steps, and then becomes more about experiencing deeper, more intentional work. And it really allows us to tap into kind of the core of who we are and what we need in order to make changes in our life. And plus, using tarot and even the aces kind of infuses some fun and levity to something that might actually feel a little overwhelming. So I'm going to spend this episode talking about each stage of change and its companion ace. And then I'm also going to pull cards to specific prompts related to that stage so you can really see how this model can be utilized in conjunction with tarot. Let's first jump in with the very first stage, which is pre-contemplation. So at this stage, we're not even really considering change, and we might not even be aware that there's a need for change. This is when we're most likely to be minimizing the benefits of change, and then we're also kind of overestimating some of the drawbacks of actually making a change. And we're usually not conscious of this mindset. So when I began developing this idea, I wanted to assign each ace to a stage of change. And I had already kind of anticipated that the pre-contemplation stage would probably be the most challenging, just because it's the stage where we're not really conscious of the change that needs to be made. So initially I'd kind of like put that stage aside and really focused on the other ones because I felt like all the other stages really naturally had an ace that fell into its like perfect match. So, for example, the Ace of Swords paired nicely with the Contemplation stage. The Ace of Pentacles paired great for the preparation stage. And then the Ace of Wands was perfect for the action stage. So this left the Ace of Cups for pre-contemplation. But it's actually kind of funny because that doesn't feel wrong to have it as pre-contemplation. And it's interesting because, I'm reflecting on this Ace of Cups, and I often think of the word oblivious when I think of the Ace of Cups, which might seem a little weird to many of you because the Ace of Cups is this really kind of positive, lovely card that folks really enjoy seeing. So to apply a word like oblivious to it might seem a little weird. However, I have a mildly embarrassing story as to why I think about the word oblivious when I see this cup, the Ace of Cups rather. And that's because back in, I think it was like 2013, 2014, I was in my last year of grad school. I'm working, 50 hours a week in my internship. I'm taking a full caseload. I was just really overwhelmed. And on top of that, my internship involved working with families who were experiencing really significant high levels of trauma. So I was just very tired. And one morning, I was out to breakfast with some friends, and the server brought over a carafe of water to the table for all of us. And, I grabbed the carafe and I'm pouring water into my glass. And suddenly I just start hearing my friends say my name. They're just like, Shannon, Shannon. And I'm like, yeah. And they are all like, the water. And they're pointing to my cup. And I look down and I find that my glass is just filled to the brim and I'm still pouring. And the water is just overflowing at this point. It's all over the table. And yeah, I had dissociated pretty severely and was oblivious to what I was doing and what was happening. So yeah, believe it or not, that experience actually comes up quite a bit when I see the Ace of Cups, which again is typically viewed as this, really positive card overflowing with good things. And then it's reversed usually implies depletion. So, applying this kind of less than positive spin to an upright version of this card might feel a little counterintuitive, but I think that also speaks to the power of imagery and memory, especially when it comes to working with tarot. So, but yeah, this story captures why the Ace of Cups can align with pre-contemplation, because sometimes we are completely unaware of a change that we need to make or a behavior that requires modification. So in that sense, the overflowing cup can symbolize both this feeling of emotional fullness or a lack of awareness, which, feels like a really good metaphor for this stage of change. Something else to consider while you're working with the Ace of Cups in the pre-contemplation stage is that cups typically represent the feelings domain of the human experience. So as you're working with this card, you might also want to be reflecting on any of the emotions that come up for you as you're thinking about what might need to be changed in your life. Speaking of, now we're going to get into pulling some cards. So this is how this episode's going to work. I'm going to talk about a specific stage and stages of change, talk about the ace that I've paired up with that stage, and then we're going to pull a card to a specific prompt about that stage. So I highly recommend you follow along, grab your deck, and pull cards with me. All right, so we're going to go ahead and shuffle. And the question that I felt most accurately reflected the Ace of Cups and the pre-contemplation stage is, what might I be oblivious to right now that needs change? So that's our question. What might I be oblivious to right now that needs change? Also, if you are following along, I recommend you pull out each ace in your deck so you're not accidentally pulling an ace to one of these prompts. And so you can reflect on them as we're talking about them. All right. Well, yikes. The Ten of Swords. I was kind of hoping for something a little less heavy, a little less abstract, but we can work with this. So the Ten of Swords to represent a change could mean a few different things. I'm going to look at this as representing self-defeating thoughts, though, because it is a suit of swords, and this person, is clearly defeated. So I think in terms of what we might be oblivious to, is how our thoughts are impacting our ability to exist in the world, to thrive, to feel alive, to enjoy our life. This person's not really enjoying much of anything. They very much look like pretty done. So I think that's the focus I'm going to have for this card. Just how maybe we need to start looking at how our thoughts are impacting our quality of life. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the second stage now, which is contemplation. And I applied the Ace of Swords to this stage. The Ace of Swords really felt fitting because, traditionally aces themselves represent that kind of raw energy, that initial spark of inspiration and really kind of like getting us going into that suit. And with the Ace of Swords, that initial raw energy can emerge as kind of this like bolt of clarity or insight, almost like an epiphany, like, yes, I am aware of what's happening. I kind of have some ideas onto why this might be happening and why I might need to start getting ready to make a change. And the contemplation stage really marks the beginning of having serious thoughts about this behavior or experience or something in your life that needs to change. And it's also when we start to weigh the pros and cons and then also start to explore any ambivalence that we might have around making a change. I really like the imagery in the Ace of Swords for this, specifically because if we look at the blade, one side of the blade is kind of shiny and the other is a little bit more shadowed, which I feel like can represent or symbolize this duality that exists within us, especially when we're making a change. So the kind of juxtaposition between hope and doubt, or feeling empowered or negative. And I think it can also represent the tension that's inherent in this stage, this mental struggle that we experience when we're trying to find balance and wanting to acknowledge that we need to make a change, but also feeling maybe resistant to making a change. So let's go ahead and shuffle. And because this is the Ace of Swords representing the contemplation stage, the question that we're going to be pulling to is, what is the story I'm telling myself about this change? Also, something to keep in mind about the Ace of Swords is, it's a sword suit, so it represents how we think. So this is absolutely an opportunity to reflect on, the thoughts that we're having about this change, about how we're going to function once we've made the change. But again, the prompt that we're pulling to is, what is the story I'm telling myself about this change? The Six of Wands reversed. This actually makes a lot of sense because, often when we are thinking of making a change, we might say things to ourselves like, well, what's the point? I'm not going to succeed anyway. I'm just going to fail. Or, who am I to think I can make this change? Which this is actually funny considering the Ten of Swords is very much this type of thinking. And we're looking at the stages of change through the lens of the Ten of Swords in terms of making a change. So yeah, I think that the story that, especially if this was for someone who was wanting to change self-defeating thoughts, this Six of Wands reversed would be applicable here because we are often stuck in our thoughts, our unhealthy, self-defeating thoughts of, what's the point? I'm not going to be able to sustain this change. I'm not going to succeed anyway. Let's go ahead and keep moving through the stages. So let's move on to the third stage now, which is preparation. So this is when we are getting ready to actually take action on making this change. And I feel like this stage was best represented by the Ace of Pentacles, because the Ace of Pentacles, that raw energy is really centered around this idea of being grounded, seeking stability, and gathering the resources that we need in order to make a change. So absolutely natural fit for kind of the getting ready to act phase of preparation. And when we're in the preparing stage, that's when we're really laying the groundwork, we're gathering resources, we're mapping out our plan. And I felt like the Ace of Pentacles reflected this specifically through the imagery of, this coin being held and kind of symbolizing that first step towards creating something new or different. So the Ace of Pentacles is really inviting us to gather resources, prepare to take action, So it makes sense that the prompt for this stage of change would be, what sort of resources do I need to gather as I start to prepare to make this change? Also, something else to keep in mind, since this is the Ace of Pentacles and this is the preparation stage, this card can represent how we are being supported during this change. So you could even pull a card to this or just reflect on who or what can offer me support and just maybe nurture and take care of me during this stage. The Magician. So cool. This is such a great card for this because I feel like it speaks to looking at the tools that we know work already. So this very much feels like tapping into kind of some past coping skills that we've learned or times that we've confidently accomplished something and using that as a resource of strength. I think that you could also get even more specific here and look at kind of each element on the table as representing some sort of resource that we have gathered. And that's going to be unique to each individual, obviously. However, if we were just looking at this card as one specific coping mechanism, my first thought goes to the idea of mindfulness and grounding. Just because the Magician is surrounded by all this foliage and they have all these items and elements on their table. And so, one of the very kind of first skills that you learn when you're trying to calm your nervous system is really paying attention to your surroundings. So it's looking around and naming things that you can hear, smell, feel, taste, see, and that's very much what feels like it's represented in this card. So anytime that we're working through making a change, we can feel a little bit more anxiety, feel a little bit more dysregulated. So I feel like the Magician speaks to that in terms of resources or really a coping mechanism, which we're actually going to get into at a later stage. But yeah, I love this as showing, hey, it's time to gather all the things that work for you and that help you feel supported. And, this could also be an altar, like making sure that you're sitting down and you have a place that you feel grounded at while you're making change. It could represent, a garden and making sure that you're out in nature and not getting too caught up in your head while you're specifically working on changing your self-defeating thoughts and stepping outside of yourself. So there's a lot happening in this card that I feel like we could probably go down a rabbit hole for. But all right, let's go ahead and move on to the action stage. And this is represented by the Ace of Wands, of course, because wands are definitely the suit of energy and action. And it felt appropriate to apply the Ace of Wands to the taking steps phase of this stage. So, with the action stage of this model, it's all about doing. So this is when we're actually putting plans into motion or making the changes that were identified as necessary in earlier stages. And it's where we really stop thinking about what needs to be done and then actually do the thing that needs to be done. And the Ace of Wands really has this forward moving energy. It has the imagery of a wand. It really feels like it's got this inherent power to do and create. And it's really a card that embodies the excitement and challenge of actively stepping into change. And I think it also speaks to the courage and determination that is often required to take those those initial scary steps, especially when there's a lot of uncertainty and even some resistance that lingers. So now we're going to shuffle and pull a card to represent one small action that we can take towards change. And as you're shuffling and pulling, you also might want to be reflecting on the fact that the Ace of Wands very much represents that initial energy that we're needing during this change. So what type of energy do you need around you? What type of energy do you need to embody? But we're specifically going to be pulling a card for what is one small action that we can take towards this change of reducing our self-defeating thoughts of the Ten of Swords. All right. Seven of Pentacles. Another really good visual card for this question. So going back to, this change of trying to limit our self-defeating thoughts, and then the action being Seven of Pentacles, I would say this card is suggesting maybe we slow down a bit. We start to analyze which thoughts we have on a daily basis that are beneficial to our growth versus detrimental, and then actively work to spend more time engaging with the thoughts that promote growth and less time on the thoughts that hinder it. And again, if we were working through these, maybe on a very personal level, we could get even more specific. But for the sake of just showing you how this works, I'm going to be a little vague. But let's go ahead and move on to the maintenance stage. So the maintenance stage doesn't have an ace applied to it because we've already gone through the aces, and it's really about just sustaining progress. So we should have all the aces in front of us at this point, all the cards that we've pulled, and we need to be thinking about how we can maintain this progress and be in this space where we're solidifying, new habits. This is the phase where we're committing to a new normal. We're consistently choosing behaviors that align with our goals, and we're working hard to resist any sort of temptation to revert back to old ways of being. And this stage typically requires a really strong sense of focus, a sense of resilience and self-awareness, as well as really making sure we have a clear understanding of why the change was personally meaningful in the first place. And then while we're in maintenance, we need to remind ourselves of how far we've actually come and how much effort that it's taken to get there. It's about staying vigilant, also anticipating any sort of potential triggers, and then preparing coping skills and strategies in advance, which is kind of what I talked about earlier when I was talking about the magician. And then we can also continue to reinforce our progress by being consistent with our practices. So any sort of new skills that we're developing or coping mechanisms that we're implementing, we need to make sure that consistency is existing during all of that. So we're going to go ahead and shuffle again. And even though we're not working with a particular ace, we are working with the fifth stage, which is maintenance. So we're going to shuffle and pull a card. And for this stage, this is going to be a specific coping skill. So I know that I talked about that a little bit with the magician, but we're going to talk about it again. So what coping skill might this card represent, the card that we pull? Ooh, the Fool. Okay. I'm actually really loving these cards. A coping skill of the Fool. I feel like that would represent maybe this, like the feelings of genuine curiosity and maybe even a playful attitude as we practice this new way of thinking. The Fool is really kind of unbothered. So to have that as a coping mechanism feels really great here, because if we go back to the original Ten of Swords, we think about how debilitating and defeating these thoughts are on us. I mean, seeing these two cards next to each other is actually really powerful because the Ten of Swords have this person pinned down. They cannot move. They can't move through life. And the Fool is just so open and unbothered, unaware. So I feel like this kind of says, hey, let's practice not putting so much weight onto these thoughts that we're having. Let's practice maybe just walking through life being unbothered, which I know is so much easier said than done. But, that's what the cards are saying. So that's what we're going to go with. All right. So that was the very first episode of the Tarot Therapy series. This was fun for me. Hopefully it was fun for you. I also modified the Celtic Cross, obviously the very popular Celtic Cross spread, to accommodate and complement the stages of change. So I recommend hopping over to Instagram to check that out if you enjoyed this episode on this theory. And yeah, if this is something that you enjoyed, please let me know, because I need to know if I should continue doing more of these. I have lots of ideas for different theories and models. But if you thought this was boring, please let me know and I won't do them anymore. But yeah, thank you all so much for supporting this work. And I hope that you enjoyed the stages of change. Thank you so much for listening to the Tarot Diagnosis. For more tarot and mental health content, follow the Tarot Diagnosis on Instagram. You can also subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode, and sign up to receive the Tarot Diagnosis emails, where you'll have access to exclusive spreads and exciting announcements. To join an incredible community of tarot and psychology enthusiasts, join the Tarot Diagnosis membership community, The Symposium, by visiting thetarotdiagnosis.com.